Welcome to the National Forum on Anti-Asian Racism, Building Solidarities. I am Josel Angelica Gerardo, a master's student in political science at the University of Toronto, recent ex-university graduate, and planning co-lead for the National Forum on Anti-Asian Racism. I can't tell you how excited I am to be kicking off this forum. Planning this with my co-lead Gabriel Chufo has been an incredible experience and a real labor of love for me. This is a topic about which I am personally passionate about, and it's very rewarding to see such keen interest from various communities. This forum is responding to the call University of British Columbia started. We aim to continue the dialogue, taking a step further by building solidarities across Asian, Indigenous, Black, and racialized communities, looking through an intersectional lens and calling for transformative change and actions. We truly believe that part of building solidarities requires us to come from a place of understanding and shared respect, and that our intent in this land acknowledgement is to help create that understanding and demonstrate that respect. Our intent is to acknowledge the land, its histories, and current circumstances so that we can inspire and drive actions that will create change for Indigenous communities and continue to bring light to the issues that exist until today. I'm calling from the territories of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee and the traditional territory of the Wendat. These territories are covered by 3 treaties, Treaty 13, Williams Treaty, and the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. We must honor these treaties by educating ourselves as settlers, acknowledging that it is not a thing of the past, but an ongoing legal obligation and responsibilities to Indigenous nations and the land. This is the land that we are not invited to, but have the privilege of settling in. I am a Filipina immigrant settler. I came here when I was 11 years old, where I had to assimilate into the white culture, abandoning my Filipina heritage and dismissing my culture's histories back home and here in these lands. However, one important cultural practice I did not forget and I treasured, a customary practice that I was taught from a very young age by my family and mostly by every Filipina I've met, is to say tabi-tabi po, which translates to excuse me or may I pass, when entering a new space or land. It is more than a sign of respect, responsibility, and acknowledgement. It becomes an agreement between yourself and the life forces visible and invisible to our eyes. It allows us to acknowledge the human and spirit forces that exist within any spaces, in the buildings, the grass, and all living and non-living things around us. My homeland, the Philippines, was colonized for over 300 years, and the impacts of colonialism are still felt by current and future generations. It has forced Filipinos to disperse across the world, many settling here since the 1500s in the lower regions of North America, as many would call it Turtle Island, and in the West Coast by the late 1800s. Many are grateful to have been provided an opportunity like no other and greatly benefiting from it, while many are still longing to be back in our homeland like myself. As I go through my own journey of learning my culture's history on this land, I encourage everyone to learn the thousands of years of written and oral histories of Indigenous peoples on this land, and as well as the histories of Black, Asian, and racialized peoples passed on through generations. These histories have shaped our modern struggles of colonialism, racism, discrimination, acts of resistance, and cultural survival. It is best to recognize the land that we are living on and learn and unlearn histories and understand how they shape our current and future experiences. Our shared and collective histories and lived experiences provide a foundation on how to build coalitions and create systemic changes for a thriving future together. This forum aims to continue the dialogue in our university to establish systemic changes that will positively impact all of us in higher education and the wider communities. Thank you. I will now give the virtual stage to Dr. Hayden King, Executive Director of the Yellowhead Institute.
Thank you, Josel. I appreciate that you've deconstructed the land acknowledgement a little bit here, allowed it to breathe. Too often it's the case that Indigenous folks in the audience hear scripted land acknowledgements as performative gestures that serve as sort of back doors out of meaningful action. In other words, we've referenced the Indigenous communities, now on to the actual business of the meeting. That is most often the case at our university, actually. But here at this forum and the first forum at UBC, Indigenous issues are centered with the aim of honest and meaningful conversation across our shared concerns while also recognizing the differences. And it's important to note that there are Asian Indigenous people that tend to be erased when we have these conversations, as if there's a clear binary. But there's nothing straightforward about solidarity among those with experiences of oppression. Colonialism, capitalism, white supremacy, gender violence are structural conditions that affect us in common to a very great degree, but also affect us in unique ways through time. I think about how colonialism in what is now Canada relied upon stealing Indigenous lands and resources while exploiting Asian laborers as they built early settlement infrastructure. I think about how Indian reserves and internment camps for Japanese Canadians were pre and post war solutions to containing supposed threats to security, read whiteness, in the emerging country. I think about how examples like these and many others were justified and permitted by invoking ugly stereotypes, many that persist and result in unspeakable acts of racism in contemporary Canada, specifically violence against Indigenous and Asian women. Remarkable, really, to reflect in this way on the history of Canada. I wonder what we would collectively learn from an Asian history of Canada or an Indigenous people's history of Canada. And I suppose that begs the question, what would we teach in our classrooms? What kind of research questions would we ask? This is supposed to be a faculty statement of solidarity, and there's much to say about new academic units and research programs, hiring plans, and student support. But in truth, learning and solidarity most often begins on a peer-to-peer basis and with small acts of kindness. So often we are islands unto ourselves, absorbed by our community's struggles, until those rare moments when we look up and around and see the web of relationships that enable our work. The Dean of Arts, a Japanese Canadian, prioritizes Indigenous education at this university and is the most supportive senior university administrator I've ever encountered. The organization that I work at, Yellowhead Institute, has emerged as a leading voice on Indigenous issues and operates smoothly because of a Japanese-Chinese project manager. Both model effective solidarity with Indigenous people every day, because solidarity is ultimately relationships. And so I think about even more stories. In 1914, in defiance of a Canadian naval blockade, Musqueam community members paddled food to starving South Asian migrants on the Komagatu Maru before those migrants were forced to leave. I think about how during the Native American occupation of Alcatraz Island in the late 1970s, a few dozen Asian American activists commissioned a ferry and brought the Indigenous protesters food and supplies. Solidarity is feeding you when you are hungry. In some ways, we have everything we need to continue a conversation that's been ongoing for over a century. We can figure out what the link is between our individual experiences across distinct communities and the broader structural forces that shape them. And then we can offer a theory and practice for transformation based on our shared values. Basically what Josel said. I genuinely hope that this is a subject of conversation over the next 2 days. I'll speak to it, but I think I'll spend more time looking up and around, backwards and forward through time, and most importantly, listening. To that end, I'd like to welcome and invite you to hear from our Chancellor, Janice Fukakusa.
Thank you for joining us today. It's inspiring to see so much interest in understanding and addressing anti-Asian and all racism. I recognize that it can be uncomfortable to acknowledge the persistence of systemic racism in the institutions where we study and work. But the fact that you are here today shows that you are prepared to confront this discomfort and be part of creating solutions. In June this year, the Angus Reid Institute published a study conducted in conjunction with the University of British Columbia. It showed that 58% of Asian Canadian respondents had experienced discrimination in the past year. And even more distressing, the study also found that Canadians of Asian descent between the ages of 18 and 34 were most likely to have experienced anti-Asian racism over the past year. That means it's quite likely more than half of the Asian and Asian Canadian students in our universities and colleges have been impacted by anti-Asian sentiment. It's also likely that some of those experiences have taken place within the walls, whether real or virtual, of their post-secondary institutions. This is why I'm proud to have played a role in supporting this second National Forum on Anti-Asian Racism. Over the next 2 days, we will continue this important conversation, deepening our understanding of anti-Asian racism and what we can all do about it. Together, we'll build on the foundation established at the inaugural forum hosted last June by the University of British Columbia. I look forward to the discussions and to a way forward that helps put a stop to racism. And now I would like to welcome Ryerson University's President, Mohamed Lashmi.
Thank you, Chancellor Fukakusa. It is exciting to see such a strong representation from across our community. Students, faculty, staff, fellow academic leaders, and community partners. We all have a role to play in addressing anti-Asian racism and creating transformative change. As an immigrant myself, I can empathize with the challenges of racism. I see many parallels with my own experiences and those of other members of my community. We can all take strength from knowing that none of us are alone in this. And as we focus on building alliances for change, it will be essential that we stand together in solidarity. I can't think of a better place to do this than our universities. A university is society's meeting place, where a diversity of communities share the same space. Ignoring racism in our own space means closing our eyes to what's going on in society. We must be honest with ourselves, even though others may use that honesty to criticize us. Barack Obama has said, sunlight is the disinfectant to racism. By open conversation, by shedding light, and by working together, we have the power to build better for the future. Thank you, and I wish you the best for a great forum.
Thank you, President Lashmi and Chancellor Fukakusa. I'm delighted to be joining all of you today for a series of timely conversations that are of deep meaning to me and to all of us here. Anti-Asian racism is something that I've experienced and resisted throughout my journey as a student, as a researcher, and now as an academic leader. And while universities have certainly changed over the years, they are still, sadly, sites in which racism and other forms of oppression persist. While many of us found our voices when we were in university, we continue to feel marginalized as interlopers and imposters. Though some of us were introduced to readings about racialization and colonialism in the lecture hall, many still perceive a strict divide between academic curriculum on the one hand and their personal and family histories, traditions, cultures, and lived experiences on the other. I've heard many Asian Canadian staff speak critically of the damages of the model minority myth and the limits of what some have called the bamboo ceiling. I have listened to racialized and Indigenous students and faculty express an inability to safely bring their true selves to the classroom. And while most universities these days highlight the importance of the local and community, university researchers and administrators still have much to learn from us about community-based research, its value, its meaning, and its place in the academy. Our goal in hosting this forum is to generate conversations around all of these issues and many more. We wish to bring people together, students, faculty, staff, and community partners, to exchange insights, to break down disciplinary and institutional boundaries, and to create spaces in which we can safely engage in such dialogue. In addition, throughout the forum, we hope to refine our understanding of the problem itself. We'll also reflect on our theme of solidarity and allyship, amplifying voices for a range of racialized and marginalized communities. We acknowledge that the long-term goals of different groups may converge at points, yet the strategies for achieving such goals can vary widely. In our struggles to achieve transformative change, we must thereby respect our different identities, histories, and the uneven impact of racism on all those who work and learn in the post-secondary sector. And with this in mind, we must also acknowledge that racism exists in our very own communities. As such, a challenge is to create transformative change in solidarity. So we have ambitious goals. Granted, we may not be able to achieve all that we set out to do, but we will put the issues on the table and advance the discussion. To do so, I ask that we all participate in these challenging conversations openly, without shame or apology. I commit to do so myself. We are and will continue to be unapologetically Asian. Now, as I browse our schedule for the next 2 days, I am energized. It will be a privilege to hear from scholars such as Dr. Aiko Day, our keynote speaker tomorrow morning, and from community and civic leaders, including philanthropist Donette Chin Loy Chang and Toronto City Councillor Kristen Wong Tam, each of whom will be participating in or moderating panel discussions. I'll also be listening closely to many of my colleagues, including Drs. Melanie Knight and Hayden King, whom you just heard from. Both Melanie and Hayden will ground and inform our discussions of building solidarities with Black and Indigenous communities. And I am most eager to hear from student participants who will be sharing their personal experiences, perspectives, and observations, some for the first time in a public setting. Finally, I wish to thank our sponsors who have helped to make this event possible. Our supporters include the Office of the Provost at Ryerson University, the Ontario Confederation of University Faculty Associations, and in the private sector, Shiseido Canada and Takeda. Our session supporters are the University of Manitoba Institute for the Humanities, the Asian Institute at the Munk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto, the Human Rights Committee of the National Association of Japanese Canadians, and the Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences. The friends who have also generously contributed are QP 3904, the Ryerson Faculty Association, and the Ryerson University Office of Sexual Violence and Support and Education. And I appreciate your kind show of support. I've just been told that we now have well over 1,000 registrants who are eager for the program to begin. So I will at this point hand the proceedings back to Josel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. This space at the National Forum will be inclusive and safe. By participating in today's events, you are agreeing to recognize our starting point, acknowledging and recognizing that we must all strive to overcome historical and divisive biases. Treat all people with dignity and respect, trusting that everyone has come to the forum to learn, grow, and share. Be open to learning, recognizing that the best way to understand the choices, actions, or intentions of one another is by asking questions. Care for ourselves and each other, acknowledging that heavy conversations can impact our mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being, and that it's okay to ask for help and support. We have created a wellness support and resources document located at the National Forum website. You can also find the link in the event lobby of the Feedloop platform. We are also hosting a rest and relaxation room, a space for attendees to step away from the event to focus on well-being, relaxation, and rest. Before we jump in, I have a few quick reminders for you. English and French closed captioning, ASL interpreter, and live French translation are available for opening, keynote, and closing remarks, and the plenary panel sessions. For concurrent sessions, English and French closed captioning are available, while ASL interpreters are available upon request. If you have any questions during a session about the forum or this platform feed loop, please use the chat function on the right side of your screen. National Forum support staff are available to connect you throughout the day. All sessions are being recorded and will be shared with participants in the coming days. We want this to be a safe and honest conversation, so please review our community guidelines, which are available in the feed loop lobby or on our website, and we'll provide the link in the chat. You can continue the conversation online and into the future on social media using the hashtag Anti-Asian Racism Forum. And if you missed any of the sessions and want to catch the highlights, check out our Instagram stories and Twitter at RU Faculty of Arts. Last but not the least, we have virtual networking opportunities. Through our various networking rooms, participants will have the opportunity to connect with one another. Find our networking rooms in our Feed Loop event portal left panel. We have a lot of great sessions planned for today and tomorrow. Remember, you can find the full schedule on our website, and we'll share that link in the chat now. I am particularly excited about plenary panel number 2, Addressing Racism in the Classroom on day 1, and the concurrent session number 8, tomorrow, Addressing Sexual Violence Targeted at Southeast and East Asian Communities in Higher Education. However, I know that all sessions are going to have great conversations with our esteemed speakers. Our next session will be starting at 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time with plenary panel number 1, Understanding the Asian and Asian Canadian Experiences in Higher Education. We look forward to virtually engaging with you throughout today and tomorrow. Thank you.